Well, hello there. It's your favourite fresh air junkie and science nerd, Nikki Hardy, and welcome to the Wildly Known Life podcast. This is a podcast that unearths the hidden power of nature to help us live happier, healthier, and more meaningful lives full of connection. Before we dive in today, I want to say two things. Firstly, if you are watching on YouTube, you might be able to tell that I am sitting in a storage closet surrounded by my sofa cushions with a sofa pillow on my lap. We've been having some trouble, or I have been having some trouble, with the sound quality. It's been sounding like I have been sitting in a cave as I've been recording. And despite this being a nature podcast, I don't actually sit in a cave. And so I don't want the sound quality to put you off listening. So if things are hopefully sounding a little better today, that's great. If not, we're going to plow on and hopefully get better as we go. This is episode 30 and we are continually trying to get better as we go along. Secondly, before we dive in, if this episode or any episode resonates with you, would you share it with all your friends? And I mean all your friends. This little podcast is growing slowly through word of mouth, which is wonderful, and you guys are the reason. And when you follow the show or share it and you click save on an episode on whatever podcast platform you use, it not only helps us enormously, but it ensures that you get all the best episodes in your podcast feed so you don't miss a thing. Okay, that's it on all the admin for this morning. Let's dive in. Let's get wild. You know how us humans, and especially us women of a certain age, or woikas as that we are now being called, do this weird thing. We long to escape life, even when life is pretty good. You know, our marriage is ticking along quite nicely. None of the kids are in crisis or struggling, which is absolutely wonderful. We're grateful for our life and our friends and the work that we're actually enjoying at the moment. And we know we are incredibly fortunate. But still, there's a part of us that longs to escape, to disappear for 3 days. And we fantasize about being somewhere completely unreachable. We crave walking alone in the woods, or we dream of booking a hotel room and ordering room service and just reading our book on our own. My kids joke that I am in my wilderness era and that I'm entering my forest dweller stage of life. You know, I love to camp alone, I walk alone, I talk to the trees and the birds, and I just love escaping into nature. And my friend Jill was really observant when she said that I look like I have these two competing desires or drives in my life. This desire to be alone, to escape, to find solitude, but also this need for deep connection and community. So we often feel this tension, don't we? I know I'm not alone in this. And I've even given it a name. And because I got my medical training at the School of Grey's Anatomy, I decided that it's a full-on midlife condition and I am 100% qualified to name it. I've called it the discombobulations, a completely unofficial midlife condition experienced by many women of a certain age. Because most of us have spent decades being needed. We've been raising kids, building careers, managing PTAs, leading church ministries. We're the ones who know where the gift wrapping is and whether we're out of sticky tape. We're the ones caring for aging parents, often from miles away. We're parenting adult children now often, or college-age kids, which is wonderful and different, but surprisingly still time-consuming. And in this new season, everything seems to be changing. And much of it is good, really good. But change is still change. And whether it's our work or our bodies not fitting and running as smoothly as they used to, or our marriages and health needing tending to in new ways, in this new place of what should be freedom, but it doesn't always feel like that, we begin to ask, what do I actually want? And that can feel surprisingly unsettling for many of us. We ask, what do I actually want? And why do I feel this low grade dissatisfaction when nothing's actually wrong? Why does escaping life sound so freakingly good when nothing is wrong? And then, of course, we start to shame ourselves and feel guilty because we love doing that. And we think, why can't I just handle this better? Shouldn't I be more grateful? Shouldn't I have figured this out or have more meaning in my life given my faith and my family and friends? So, we humans do this weird thing. And it turns out that nature, unsurprisingly, does something remarkably similar. And when we put the two together, we get to see our life a little differently. There's an ecological term called refugia. Refugia is actually the plural of refugium. And essentially, refugia are these little pockets of habitat where life can survive when the conditions around them become difficult or even hostile. In other words, they change. Think about a sheltered valley during an ice age, or a cool stream during a period of warming, or a shaded slope during extreme heat, maybe the heat of the day, or a protected patch of forest after a major hurricane, like the one that we saw here in North Carolina a few years ago. Refugia aren't the whole landscape, they are just a small part of it, a protected pocket where life can be sheltered, protected, and persist despite what's happening all around. You know, we're familiar with the Ice Age, and during the Ice Ages, much of Northern Europe became unsuitable, more than unsuitable, dangerous for many temperate species. But the species didn't simply disappear. Amazingly, populations survived in warmer, more protected areas. Those were particularly in the Iberian, Italian, and Balkan peninsulas. These became what scientists call glacial refugia. And as the climate then warmed up again and the glaciers retreated, those populations that had sought shelter in those pockets of refugia expanded back out. And what I love is that they didn't survive by becoming better at living in the ice. They didn't suddenly become ice species. They survived by finding a protected pocket where the ice wasn't so bad. You might remember when Mount St. Helens erupted in the 1980s. 230 square miles of forest and terrain were destroyed by its lateral blast, and the resulting ashfall affected a vast area of more than 22,000 square miles. And it was across the United States almost overnight. If you look at a photograph of it, you'd be forgiven for thinking there is absolutely no life left there. But there was. There were little pockets that survive. There were places protected by rocks and patches of sheltered terrain. Even snow and fallen trees acted as little pockets of refuge. And these pockets became safe havens from which life could begin moving back into the devastated landscape once again. Author Kathleen Dean Moore writes beautifully about this in Great Tide Rising, where she's not just making the point that nature is resilient, which of course it is, but more than that, she's saying life didn't just survive, but went on to grow, flourish, and thrive because not every part of the landscape was destroyed. And even after a catastrophe, life can persist in little pockets of protection, which then become the beginnings of recovery and growth. And this is where we are more like our non-human neighbours than we realise, and our worlds collide. I know that we as people, our human nature is to have answers, to fix things, to be proactive. Then we assume that when life gets difficult or changes and we feel this discombobulation, when it all shifts, we think we have two choices. We've got to escape it or handle it better. And we tell ourselves that we need to be more resilient and more grateful for all the good things in our lives. We need to be more disciplined to get our protein and our 10,000 steps and to hydrate. We've got to get our shit together and have better boundaries, manage our stress, get up earlier, do the thing, push through. And sometimes, yeah, we do need to do these things. But this idea of refugia offers us another, gentler, more biologically natural possibility that works with our physiology and our neurobiology. In a 2020 paper that I'll link to in the show notes, ecologist Toni Lynn Morelli and her colleagues describe climate refugia as a kind of slow lane for biodiversity. And no matter whether life is all rainbows and butterflies for us or stinks worse than a tuna sandwich left out in the Texan sun, we humans need slow lanes too. We might think we need to escape life or to handle things better, but what we probably need is simply to find the safety of our own personal slow lane. A place where the conditions are temporarily maybe a little less harsh, where the stress and demands on us ease off for a while. Admittedly, in a culture that's relentlessly asking us to live in the fast lane, it's no wonder we're exhausted and long to just escape, to pull off the highway of life and to retreat and escape down a gravel road to nowhere. Now, a refugia, or finding our own personal slow lane, doesn't guarantee that everything is going to go back to normal. But it does give us enough protection, enough time, space, rest, or slowness to survive while things change, so we can flourish once again. You're probably thinking this is where I'm about to invite you to the refugium of the Wildly Known Retreat. But I'm going to be honest with you, I'm not going to do that for a number of reasons. And it's actually that I have decided to postpone the retreat until spring. If I'm honest, part of that reason is that I need to find my own personal refugium, a slow lane after speeding along the fast lane of my life with my check engine blasting and blaring out at me for too long. So this isn't an invitation to the Wildly Known Life Retreat, although I will be rescheduling it in the spring for anyone who's like, oh shucks, Nikki, I was just about to sign up. I do apologise. But let me encourage you. To find our own slow lane, we don't need to pack a bag and abandon our family. Although, don't tempt me. But what we both probably need is to build a little pockets of refuge into our ordinary lives. And the thing about pockets is that they're small. Our refugium, your refugium, where you find slowness and protection, is really small. Doesn't have to be big or complicated. It can simply be a morning walk around your vegetable garden in your pajamas, coffee in hand, before anyone is awake. It can be turning your phone off for an hour and reading your book in the middle of the afternoon. How amazing is that? But how controversial in our minds is that? It could be figuring out what a weekly Sabbath actually looks like for you. Because Sundays with church, hosting lunch for friends or family, catching up on laundry or the supermarket run, and planning the week can be exhausting, not refreshing. Maybe for you, it's an afternoon in the woods, learning a few tree names or identifying bird songs with the Merlin app. Maybe it's turning the radio off and not listening to a podcast next time you're in the car alone and simply daydream. Or maybe it's seeing a friend you can talk to without needing to have it all together or feel like she is going to try and fix you. Marina Ritchie has this beautiful poem called The Weaver. It's about a hummingbird building her nest, and she describes this tiny cup nest woven from spider silk, moss, lichen, feathers, thistle, and fur. And I love this image because the refugium doesn't have to be enormous, like I said. It's just this tiny little pocket where vulnerable new life can be protective. One tiny cup nest, built from what's already there. They don't need to be enormous or complicated. And Deborah Reinstra, whose book Refugia takes this whole ecological concept to a new level and asks what it means spiritually, is absolutely wonderful. She asks, what if people of faith become people of refugia? So not only can we find and ask where our personal slow lane or refugium is, but maybe one of the gifts of having our own refuge is that we can somehow become safe places for other people. And there are lots of ways we can do that. And ultimately, of course, our ultimate refugia, our ultimate refuge is God, of course. You know, in Psalm 46:1, it says, God is our refuge and our strength. In Psalm 32:7, we're reminded that you are my hiding place, God. And Psalm 91:4 says, under his wings, you will find refuge. And of course, there's that beautiful image of a mother eagle sheltering her chicks from the snowstorm, being a refuge for them. And Jesus modeled the idea of his own personal slow lane or sheltering in his refugia throughout his ministry, when he withdrew repeatedly, when he went into the wilderness, when he stepped away from the crowds, and he prayed alone, and he intentionally distanced himself from the demands around him. And we can see that when Jesus withdrew, he didn't disappear completely. He retreated, he sought refuge, and he re-emerged. So, as we close, remember, when humans do that weird thing and say, I want to get away from my life, even though nothing's wrong, nature says, oh, we do that. Those places are called refugia, which makes us wonder, maybe we don't need to escape or handle life better. Maybe we simply need our own personal slow lane. And so we're going to end, as we always do, with a simple, embodied, repeatable practice, or a prayer or an invitation to take into our days. And we're going to settle ourselves, as we always do, with a centering prayer. And we can hold the question, where is my refugia? And here, as we take time to be with God now, let's rest a moment in stillness, returning our wandering minds to his presence and responding with openness. Here are a few reflection questions to help you find and practice your slow lane. Starting with a slightly uncomfortable but honest question. Do you actually have a slow lane in your life? If you do you pull into it often? Or do you feel too guilty spending time there? If you don't, let's think about the different types of refugium we can find. First, physical refugium. And we can ask ourselves, where does our body slow down? When we think about relational refugium, we can ask, who feels like a tiny cup nest or an exhale when you're with them? And then a spiritual refugium, when we can ask, where do we most easily notice or connect with God? And then there's a temporal refugium as well. When does nobody need anything from you? What are those times during the day when things naturally slow down? So maybe this week, instead of asking yourself, how can I handle everything better? Maybe ask yourself, where can I find my slow lane in everything that's going on? Where's the place I can be protected from the noise long enough to hear what's happening inside me? All right, friends. Well, thanks for spending time with me on the Worldly Known Life podcast and sharing it with all your equally discombobulated friends who long to stop the world and get off for a while and escape life for a hot second. You can also find me and lots of ways to get into nature and live happier, healthier lives over at the Wildly Known Life on Substack. And it's often there that the deeper conversation happens, as everyone can show up and have their little say and comment in the comment section. And I'll link that, of course, in the show notes. I'd love to see you there. And as always, step outside, take a deep breath, drop your shoulders, they're not earrings, and see what our wildly wonderful God has to say. Until next time, my friend, stay wild.